objectives of the survey. All right, so the purpose of the survey is to determine the effects that COVID-19 pandemic had on businesses in the Monmouth Ocean area, see how we compare to other regions in the state of New Jersey, determine what business issues affect companies in Monmouth and Ocean County, assess projections for businesses and economic conditions in 2021, and MODC intends to utilize the results and information and feedback we get from these type of presentations to help be an advocate for local organizations throughout the year. So I want to thank Ben and his team at MODC for all their help. Thank NJBIA for allowing us to incorporate the results of their survey. And then obviously a big shout out to Danielle Brzezinski, our marketing director, who actually does all the work for the survey to make it possible. So thank you very much, Danielle. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's see what we learned about 2020 and learn about the impact COVID-19 had on businesses in our area. And we want to find out how they coped with that pandemic. And since this year's survey is a little different in content and format, my partner Don Cowan will also be presenting slides as well as providing commentary. But remember, Don, someone else has control of the mute button. So just watch what you say now, okay? Next slide. The survey was sent to members of Monmouth Ocean Development Council, as well as various chambers of commerce in the Bi-County region and industry and trade associations. Just to give you an idea of the time frame of the survey, it was conducted between October 30th, 2020, right through December 4th, 2020. So once again, this year is consistent with prior years. We had larger responses from Monmouth County, but this year we were pleasant to see that Ocean County had an increase in the amount of their responses. They came up 10% as far as their responses. In the other category, we had responses from Mercer County and Burlington County. And I think we even had one response from Las Vegas, Nevada. So probably someone who was on the list who relocated out to Las Vegas. So that was interesting. Next slide. Again, we had a nice mix of industries that responded to the survey. The majority of this year's responses came from professional service and non-for-profit industries. Combined, they accounted for almost 2/3 of all the responses that we received. Interesting this year to see that the responses from the healthcare group were only 4%. That's down from 18% last year. But that kind of makes sense because, as you're aware, when COVID hit, a lot of the healthcare facilities had to physically shut down and close. And so possibly that slipped through the cracks, or maybe even some of them classified themselves in the professional services industry. So maybe that's why that group went down a little bit. Next slide. On this slide, we're interested to know how many people businesses employed prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So more than half of the respondents fell in the 1 to 25 category, while 20% said they employed 50 to 250, and a combined 16% said they employed over 250 employees. To give you a sense of the size of the companies that responded to the survey. Okay, next slide. Okay, when we asked them how many people do you currently employ, the good news is that the number of people businesses employed prior to the pandemic didn't change much during the pandemic or throughout the year for that matter. This is pretty much consistent with what we experienced with our client base as well. And we'll probably get into a couple possible reasons for that as we go through the survey in the next upcoming slides. Okay, next slide. 75% of this year's respondents said that they have been negatively financially impacted by COVID pandemic. And yet on the previous screen, they said that they maintain the same level of employees. We're guessing that's probably as a result of the PPP loans, so they were able to maintain the same level of employees. According to the NJBIA survey, 40% said they experienced a slowdown in their industry. Next slide. Here we asked them how they dealt with the financial impact of COVID-19 pandemic. We asked them to check all that applied. That's why you see a lot more responses. The most common method for dealing with the pandemic was to cut back on spending, or if they're nonprofit, they canceled or postponed events or services they were providing. In addition to reduced work hours and furloughs, that's one of the ways they handled it. We even saw in our industry, there was a lot of CPA firms that actually reduced salaries for their employees, kept the same hours, but reduced their salaries and actually issued furloughs. And so fortunately for our firm, we didn't have to do that, but we saw that among some of our clients as well. Okay. So I guess now, Don, we're going to take it back to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Steve. Throughout this presentation, I think you're gonna see Steve and I are gonna interject a lot about what we learned from our clients and the fact that we filled out a lot of these PPP forms for the clients for them to get their revenues. And after the survey was done, Steve and I made some phone calls to various leaders in the area in various industries and services throughout Monmouth and Ocean County. And because of that, we can give you a lot of feedback. We believe what this various questions are gonna, actually present. For example, are you concerned about the negative financial impact on COVID? 19% said they are not, 81% said they were very worried, or at least worried. This might be a timing question because now we're finding over the last 3 weeks, we have gotten phone calls from clients again saying they're worried. So we'll be interested to see if you had actually asked the same question today, what the clients would say. Would it be higher? I will say this much though, in the Monmouth and Ocean area, we found certain businesses did a lot better actually. For example, restaurants with drive-throughs, pizza places, hardware stores, packaging manufacturers, contractors in remodeling homes, transportation and logistic companies that we handle several of them throughout the state. And quite honestly, because of Amazon and other places, they had a banner year. Real estate, the residential real estate in Monmouth County was booming. The boating industries, recreational vehicles and camping, and those industries actually did a lot better based on what happened due to COVID. Next slide, please. During the pandemic, what percentage of your workforce was reassigned to work from home or work remotely? Now, the interesting thing about this is that if you look at the last two numbers, the 27 and the 36, therefore 63% of the workforce, they had at least 75 or 76% of the workers working from home. That's a very high number for COVID. And we still find that right now that is still continuing. The only difference is the percentage might have gone down a little bit as far as the number of employees working from home. It's more like in that 50% range. For example, in our firm, we still allow everyone to work from home as long as they want. And we're going to continue that even starting in 2021 and 22. Next slide, please. What percentage of your workforce has returned to their work? Like we said before, in this one, it's interesting because you have basically 62% where they are less than 50% returned. If you add up all those numbers where it says the 36 and the 15, so therefore when you add them up, very few firms are actually back at work. I believe Zoom is here to stay. Between Zoom and professional offices, as far as working back office, many companies are making a decision to let their employees work from home. Next one, please, Danielle, thank you. Did you furlough or lay off any of your workforce due to COVID-19? Again, this is interesting, but we found that 33% said yes, 67% said no. In particular, if any employer could do this, they decided to reduce costs in other areas, trying to reduce their office expenses, trying to reduce the transportation expenses, whatever they could, and we're trying not to lay people off. One thing we did notice, though, is that due to the uncertainty of the way the PP laws were written, there was an important date in this information, and more employees right now, in the beginning when we first saw the pandemic hit, if you laid employees off before March 31st, there might have been a benefit for you when you filled out your PPP applications. Therefore, there was a rush to determine if I was going to lay people off, should I lay them off before March 31st, 20, or after April 1st, 2020? I do think this answer might be different now based on the timing of the survey also. Next one, please. Okay. How many employees did you furlough or lay off due to coronavirus? Now, obviously, 72% laid off between 1 and 10 employees. We found that in most of these industries that we surveyed, or we found out, Steve and I asked questions to, it was in healthcare, travel, leisure, and hospitality. Obviously, that involves the boardwalk. Summer camps, they were either closed or open for less amount of time. The beach clubs over here in Monmouth County, they had issues, and restaurants. They were the ones that we saw most of the layoffs. Next one, please. Let me just get over here. Do you plan to furlough or lay off any of your workforce due to the coronavirus pandemic? Now, these are for the people that basically did not lay them off yet. Are they going to be moving forward? Only 4% said yes. I think this is important to note the timing, because if the survey ended on December 4th, we might see a big change now if we ask that question based on what's happening. I know that a lot of firms, a lot of accounting firms, law firms, and people that we have talked to are not opening up their New Jersey or New York office to after Labor Day. And we're having some other businesses talk about not opening up their office to their team members to at least after July 4th. So you might get a different answer based on what's happening now. Also, we are getting a lot of phone calls lately from people asking us about the new second round of PPP funds or third round, saying, do you think I'm going to be able to get the money? And Steve will talk more about that one later on. Please go to the next one, Danielle. How many employees do you plan to furlough or lay off due to coronavirus in the future? Again, that's based on the fact that there's 4% of the population right now that's of the survey that said they're going to still lay people off. And of that 4%, they're saying that 67% are going to lay off between 0 and 10 employees. We do see, though, that employers, as much as possible, again, are trying to keep their employees and do everything else possible. Next one, please, Danielle. Okay. Have you recently brought back any furloughed or laid off employees? 72% say yes, and 28% say no. This is interesting because we've had a situation where a lot of employers have told us this. They have asked the employees to come back, but because the employees were getting an additional $600 in unemployment per week, a lot of them did not want to come back. And the employers were getting nervous over the fact that when they first had to fill out the PPP loan applications, it stated the fact that you had to try to maintain employment. Well, eventually it turned out the fact that if employees did not want to come back, there was a way around that and how they worded the information, that it was not your fault if an employee did not want to come back and they were still allowed to get the PPP funds. Next one, please. And this is the question that's actually saying, how many recently furloughed or laid off employees did you attempt to bring back? And it's really going over the exact same numbers. And it's explaining, almost like tied this slide into the last slide. Steve, I think you're up now.
Okay, well, Don was talking about the PPP loans. So now we're going to spend a little bit more time and drill down a little bit more specifics about the PPP loans. So here we asked, did your business participate in the Paycheck Protection Program? So you can see here a little more than half participated in the PPP program. We would have expected that number to be a little bit higher. Maybe the application process was a little intimidating to some smaller companies. I know, as Don mentioned earlier, that our firm was very involved with either assisting our clients preparing the forms or actually preparing the forms for them. And a few slides coming up ahead, we're going to go into more detail as to why maybe some of those companies did not participate in the PPP program. Okay, next slide. Next, we asked them, have you received your PPP loan money? So just about all the participants that applied for the PPP had received their funds by the end of the survey. Don't know what was going on with the 5% that said they had not. Didn't know if their applications might have been rejected or held up for problems with the filing of their applications. So that could be the reason for that one. Okay, next slide. So if you received your PPP loan, have you begun using the funds? So as you can see here, 97% said that they were using the funds. And again, that's the intent of the program, was to get the funds out, use the funds, and keep people employed. So again, don't know what was going on with that 3% that said they did not. Okay, next slide. So for those that have received their PPP money, we asked them, have you rehired part of your workforce or maintained workforce levels specifically to maximize the PPP loan forgiveness, which was part of the criteria for the forgiveness portion of the loan. So here we see that just about 80% indicated they rehired part of their workforce to maximize forgiveness, which was the intent of the program. Maybe some businesses in that 20% category had trouble rehiring their employees for the very reason Don cited before. Quite often they were making more money on the unemployment and the supplemental $600 they were getting than they would have gotten if they did get back to work. And that kind of put some employers in an awkward position because they really needed the help. And in order to rat out those employees that they made offers for, they would have to offer them in writing, and the employee would have to reject in writing. And then the employer would submit to the unemployment agency that, hey, you know, I offered this person their job back. They said no. So they really don't belong on unemployment anymore. But I don't really know of any cases where that happened. I talked to some clients and business owners that thought about it, but they just didn't want to put that kind of onus on their employees. They valued the people, they wanted them to come back, and they know they were going through some very tough times, and they wanted to work as best they could with them. Next slide. Okay, for those 46% that indicated they did not participate in the PPP program, we wanted to know what their reasoning was. So although there are 11 items that are listed here, more than half of those items really could be put in the same bucket. They didn't qualify for one reason or another reason. But some of the other comments were pretty interesting. One comment's too many unknowns related to the program, not needed enough, didn't want to deal with the loan forgiveness process, and then gave funds back due to Medicaid funding and concern for double dipping. Now, what they're talking about there, double dipping, is if your organization received federal or state funding or reimbursement for employees in your business or that were servicing or running programs, you could not use the PPP loan money to pay for those employees again, since you are already getting paid for them through a federal or state agency. So that's what they were called, to the double dipping. And that was important to the nonprofit group who was dealing with that. Next slide. So here we asked them if they applied for the economic injury disaster loan, or they called the EIDL loan, and only 31% said yes, they did apply. We would have expected that number to be a little higher as well, in light of the fact that the first $10,000 of that loan, in essence, would be a grant and would not have to be repaid. So I don't know why anybody wouldn't file for that and just get $10,000 that they wouldn't have to repay. But apparently there was a group that did that. So maybe some didn't understand that part of the loan process, and that's why they didn't apply for the EIDL loan. I don't know. We couldn't drill down far enough to determine that. But just about every client I had, including our firm, applied for and got the $10,000 portion of the EIDL loan anyway. Next slide. When we asked, have you received your EIDL loan? It'd be interesting to get a feel for the size of the EIDL loans that were received. 65% said yes, but we don't know what size loans they requested. Probably most of them just went with the $10,000 because it was a gimme and they didn't have to worry about paying it back. But we didn't really ask that question and drill down that far enough on the EIDL loans. So now, Don, I'm going to turn it over to you if I can have a sip of coffee.
I'm going to give you some information now in the next couple of slides that we have some statewide numbers. So we might give you that at the same time, because numbers right now are showing that do you anticipate needing additional financial support in 2021? And since the survey happened, basically from October through December 4th, almost everyone had the money by then already. So even though everyone had the money, they are saying 60% said that they need some additional funding. Now, of that amount, when I compare it to the New Jersey BIA Association, Business and Industry Association, they said 56% felt that they need additional funding. So we're right on target right now for the whole state. If you can compare Monmouth and Ocean County just to the state, we are in the same place as far as that is concerned. Now, can you please go to the next slide, Danielle? With remote work, do you plan to reduce the amount of space needed for your business in 2021? I'm going to give you a couple answers here. 28% said yes, 49% said no. And then outside of New Jersey was 0, and then unsure was 23. Steve and I belong to 2 other associations, and one association we belong to is called the G400, and that's the 400 largest accounting firms in the country, and they did the exact same survey nationwide, and they came back and it said that first of all, 29% of all the employees that work at home can work from home 100% of the time. That's an interesting statistic. But when they asked the question, would you consider reducing your space in 2021, the statistics were the same. They asked another question, would you consider reducing your space over the next 5 years? That number was over 70% of the employers said yes. So I think that in the short term, you're not going to see it yet because of uncertainty, but eventually by 2025, as leases become due or they figure this out more, you're going to see more and more employees working from home. Next one, please. Are you a for-profit business? Now we broke this down and Steve's going to handle the not-for-profit side of the responses that we got back in this survey. So 34 of them were a not-for-profit and 66 were for-profit. So the next couple of slides are going to be based on the for-profit industry. So let's go to the next one, Daniel. Okay. Did the coronavirus pandemic affect your revenue and sales for 2020? 23% said it was an increase, and I believe that was because of the industries I mentioned before. Some of the businesses here, because of the pandemic, had a fantastic year. 23% said they remained the same, and we had a 54% decrease. According to the New Jersey State Society we were talking about before, the NJBIA, 19% said their sales increased. 19% said they stayed the same, but 62% said their sales decreased. What I thought was interesting in this, though, in our findings with our clients, that even though their sales decreased, they acted pretty fast. The business environment turned around and they reduced their cost as much as possible without trying to reduce the labor cost. And I believe at the next slide or a couple later on, we'll see that. Please go to the next one, Danielle. Okay. How do you expect your revenue and sales will be affected in 2021 by the pandemic? In the New Jersey Business Association Outlook, 77% said they expect future losses. That's a big difference compared to ours. So basically, 33% said of the respondents that they anticipate losses of revenue for the first half of 21, and 11% said they expect revenue to be lower for all of 21. And that also 6% said they expect this to be more than a 1-year process. they expect to still be losing revenue in 2022. Almost like it's going to be a recession that's going to go on longer. Please, next one, Danielle. Steve, I believe that's you.
I'm sure I could take that one if you like. These next two slides are geared to the nonprofit organizations to compare their 2019 services and programs to their 2020. So here you can see 44% decreased their services as compared to 0 last year. 28% said they increased, and the same 28% said they remained the same. We mentioned in an earlier slide that to help them deal with the financial impact of the pandemic, some nonprofits canceled events and or some of their services, and we know that very well here at MODC with our Silver Gull. But then there were some nonprofits who actually made more money on some of those types of events that they had. They were early registrations. People paid before the pandemic really hit, or people realized how bad the pandemic was going to be. So they sent in their ads and they made their ticket reservations. And then when things shut down and the nonprofit could not hold the event, they went back and said to the people, would you like to roll this money forward into next year's event? Do you want it refunded? Or do you want to just make it as a donation to the organization? And there were a lot of people and businesses that said, just keep it and make it for a donation. You need the money. So ironically, there were some of those type of nonprofits that actually had better years at more profitability than in the past. Next slide. Again, this was for the nonprofits. Did you decrease services in 2020 as a result of the coronavirus pandemic? Only 52% indicated that the decrease was due to the pandemic. It'd be interesting to know what caused a decrease for the other 48% if it wasn't the pandemic. We all know of nonprofit organizations that actually had to increase due to the need, the food banks, counseling services as a result of the pandemic. So there were nonprofits and that organizations who were struggling to keep up with the additional need and services they had to provide. Okay, next slide. All right, so here we asked them, what benefits do you currently provide your employees? And we wanted to compare last year's to this year's. So the responses in the dark column were last year's results, and the responses in the light blue column were the responses we received this year. And pretty consistent with results from prior years. Health insurance and retirement benefits kind of top the list for the benefits. But you notice the big increases in flexible work hours, 43% last year up to 59% this year, and incentive and bonus programs up from 36% to 47%. So the employers wanted to make sure that they retain their good employees. So they're going to offer these types of benefits to them to make sure they don't jump ship and leave and go somewhere else. And we experienced that firsthand. We recently hired a tax manager, came from a bigger firm than ours. And one of the things he liked about our firm, it was number one, our culture that we had. And number two, we allowed him the benefits to work from home, not just during COVID-19, but even after COVID-19. And that was a big draw for him. And that's what a lot of companies were experiencing. Next slide. Okay, so here we asked them if they reduced the amount of benefits they offered their employees due to the pandemic of COVID-19. We're pleased to see that only 13% said they reduced the benefits as a way to deal with the pandemic. And on the slide on the right there, you can see we asked them what they anticipate doing in 2021 regarding their benefits. And it's nice to see that 71% expect to keep the benefits at least the same. 11% want to increase, and only 18 expect to decrease their benefits. So in the NJBIA survey, 28% said they plan on discontinuing their healthcare coverage in 2021. So let's see how that's going to work for morale for them, because that's going to be a killer for a lot of people. Next slide. We know that more people were working remotely, so we asked them, did you make investments in technology infrastructure or IT as a result of the pandemic? 67% did invest in technology infrastructure and information technology, while 33% said they did not. Maybe some of those folks in the 33% category responded they did not because they already had the technology and the infrastructure already in place, so there was no need for them to ramp up and make that investment. And just to give you an example with our own firm, when our professional staff works in the office, they have a laptop that they put in a docking station. but on their desks, they have two very large monitors. So when they were forced to work from home, they removed their laptop, took them home, and that laptop's nice to work off for a couple hours, but that small screen's not sufficient when you're dealing with a bunch of data and tax information. So the partners in the firm made a decision to actually buy them big dual monitors and have them shipped to their houses with instructions on cabling on how to hook it up to the laptop, so they would have the mirror workstation at home that they had in the office, and they would be much more productive. And in addition to that, we actually bought the Logitech cameras to mount on top of those monitors so they could participate in Zoom or other video type conferencing meetings amongst each other and with our clients. So we felt that was number one, just made sense to help the firm, to help the client service, and actually as a little perk for the employees. They really appreciated that as well. Next slide. So here we want to drill down a little further to see what types of investments they made. So we asked them, in which areas of technology, infrastructure, IT did you invest? Not surprising to see the biggest number is in video conferencing at 93%, followed by software and equipment at 78%, investments in cloud-based services 62%, and with more people working remotely, you'll continue to see investments in cybersecurity. So I know in our firm as well, we made the decision back in the fall, last fall, to migrate everything to the cloud. Not having a crystal ball knowing the pandemic was going to hit, it just made economic and good business sense for us to do that for multiple reasons. So we were in a great position when the pandemic hit to have everybody work remotely. So that worked out very well for us. Next slide. We wanted to know if COVID-19 pandemic made it difficult for businesses to find employment applicants in line with their desired skill set that they needed. 58% said that they did not find it difficult to locate applicants, which is good. I know in our healthcare group within our firm, they were growing and they needed to hire immediately a lot of people, and they turned to Zoom interviews. For those interviews with those applicants, then they made offers through Zoom and actually hired people through Zoom. And I think things like that are going to be here to stay. That's not going to go away after the pandemic's gone. Okay, next slide. Those businesses that found it difficult to locate employment applicants, the most popular tool to deal with that shortage was to cross-train staff. 44% of the businesses were able to increase pay as an incentive to retain employees. 33% said that they outsourced, and 15% said they used, excuse me, temps. The cross-training staff is always a good business idea and concept, and businesses should be doing that constantly. Okay, now Don, I think it's back to you.
Yeah, I'll take it, Steve. You need a rest, Steve. Get some water. Now we're talking about the business executives and what they feel as far as what's happening in the bi-county region and the state also, because we have some information in that, which I thought was interesting. But we revamped the potential concerns due to the pandemic situation. And what we thought was interesting is that last year, the biggest concerns were basically healthcare costs. And they were the cost of doing business. Now that's changed a lot. I think one of the things that I want to mention when we look at this right now also is the uncertainty of the PPP money and how it could have been used was a big issue during 2020 and the tax impact of it. If you remember correctly, the House didn't, the Senate and the House did not change the taxability or the non-taxability, I should say, of the expenses in the PPP until the first week of December. So when clients were getting the PPP money, and I'll just give you an example, if some clients got $1 million in PPP money, they were told by their accountants to save 40 cents on the dollar or 30 cents on the dollar for potential tax impact. So they were saving either $400,000 or $300,000. They did not find out this until December of 2020 that they were going to be able to make the expenses that were used to pay the expenses that were paid from the PPP money as a tax deduction. Therefore, there is a bucket of money that a lot of individuals or firms, or businesses have right now going into 2021. And Steve and I found in our research and with our clients that even though their sales went down, their net income actually went up in this situation because the PPP money actually helped them out. So even though these funds have money, they are still extremely nervous on what's going to happen in the future. And they're very worried about there being a recession due to the pandemic. That's why the ratio is so high of 85%. Next one, please. And this is interesting because do you plan to expand your business in 2021? The answer was 24%. Last year was 24%. Do you plan to expand your business in New Jersey? This year it's 11%. Last year that was 23%. So unfortunately, a lot of the businesses are saying, yeah, we're willing to expand, but it went down from 23% to expand in New Jersey down to 11. So that's a concerning number for us. If you look at the statewide, not the Monmouth and Ocean County numbers, the question was, do you plan to expand in New Jersey? The answer was down to 8%. So therefore, we have an issue as far as the potential expansion of still businesses expanding in New Jersey. If you go to the very next slide, what is the reasons why you plan to expand or move out of New Jersey? And the answer was normal business expansion. This year, I should say, last year that was 44%. This year, that is 75%. So they're just saying that the businesses are potentially growing and they're just moving out because they see more opportunities outside of New Jersey. It wasn't because of so much the COVID or other reasons. The number one answer was just normal business expansion. And that's why we're willing to expand outside of New Jersey. And that's an alarming fact for us too, that we have to dig in somehow and figure out why in the normal business case do they feel it necessary to expand outside of New Jersey. And then you can see the financial impact of COVID was 25%. The other areas, they actually went down a little bit. Taxes last year was 44%, this year it's 38%. And the cost of doing business last year was 56%, this year it's 25%. So for some reason, they just feel it's necessary, that it's better for them to expand outside of New Jersey than inside. Steve, I think you're up now.
All right, so the last question that we asked in the survey was to ask them to share their thoughts about the business climate in Monmouth and Ocean County. As you can see here, they weren't shy with their comments. I'm not going to read all those to you, but I'm just going to highlight a few of them for you. They're concerned about the long-term impact of COVID-19 on their business, as well as state and local budgets. So they're concerned whether the state and local budgets are going to be able to continue to provide the services at the level that they were in the past. And they're also concerned that maybe they're going to experience increase in taxes to provide those services. Concerns about consumer health and safety, including the senior population and the impact it will have on their business. There's concerns for the retail, hospitality, tourism, and the commercial real estate sector. Concerns that consumers will come out and support the local businesses. I know there's a lot of movements afoot to come out and support the local businesses. Nothing against the big franchise companies, but when you see the mom and pop companies going out of business at the rate they have been going out, especially in the restaurant industry, it's pretty sad and frightening. And they're concerned about the business climate and the stability of it. They said it's stable, but precarious due to the pandemic. I'm very concerned about the number of businesses that are closing permanently. And just to take a look at the NJBIA survey, when asked how New Jersey's economy will fare in the first 6 months of 2021, 28% said it would be better, while 40% think that it will be worse. So next slide. All right, so what did the survey tell us? Well, both MODC and NJBIA results illustrated the financial impact of the COVID pandemic on businesses. The coronavirus pandemic caused a bleak outlook for the New Jersey economy for 2021. Quite a few companies in our areas and statewide sought federal and state funding. Many business executives in Monmouth and Ocean are concerned about the lasting effects that COVID pandemic is going to have. Our respondents are also concerned about the pandemic effects on the retail, hospitality, restaurant, and tourism sector as well. The significant decrease in the plans to expand Monmouth and Ocean County, an economic recession, health, safety, and the decrease in consumer spending are major concerns for businesses in Monmouth and Ocean counties. One of the things that didn't come up, which I thought somebody would have brought it up as far as the response, is about the education system. I know there's a lot of concerns from parents that their kids might not be learning, especially the young ones. How do you have a kindergarten or a first grader homeschool? It's going to be very difficult. I was surprised nobody mentioned that as a concern in the survey, but we didn't ask that question specifically. But then talking to clients and with their own situation with their children, they're concerned about remote learning for their children. I think they might be back a year as far as the education process goes. One of the things we saw was a shift away from being concerned about high costs as we've had in the past, and now they're concerned more about lower sales and they're concerned more about health and safety issues. We saw what the tremendous positive impact that the PPP loan program had, which will continue on with round 2 of the PPP program. Just to highlight some of the successes of the PPP loan program, nationwide there were 5.2 million PPP loans. 4.2 million of those loans were under $150,000. You hear in the news about all the big loans, the big companies that were getting them, but really the majority, 4.2 million, were under $150,000. And that was really the intent of that program in the first place, was to help small business owners. And in total, it's estimated that 51 million Americans kept employed as a result of the PPP loan program. 3 months ago, an organization called the Tax Foundation released the results of their State Business Tax Climate Index. The index is designed to show how well states structure their tax system based on all the taxes that the state imposes. And anybody want to guess where New Jersey fared? Number 50. We were in dead last place, number 50. Okay. So I just had to throw that in there. I'm sorry. So it's going to be interesting to see as we climb out of this pandemic and things start to get back to whatever the new normal is going to look like. Will the concerns for the business owners still be over sales and health and safety, or will it revert back to the old high taxes, cost of doing business, and all the traditional things we've seen in the past? So next slide. Questions for anybody?